Chapter 3. Layla's hand gripped tightly at the rock and rubble until it hurt. She missed her parents. Coming home had only made those feelings worse. The store brought the memories flooding back, and with that, old wounds she thought long closed were reopened. It had been a mistake to return here. There was nothing but pain. She gave Alex a quick glance. His brown eyes were calm, even in these moments of terror, with death only a thin wall away and lurking. The bloodthirsty rovers and marines waited outside, but he kept his breathing still. She envied his poise and wanted to prove she could match it. "My house is only a few blocks down," she whispered. "I know where we are now." "We're not going anywhere with that chopper up there. It might have saved us from those rovers, but it wasn't trying to," Alex whispered back. Dallin was turning to peek out the window. When he put his back to the wall again, his expression was grim. "There are too many out there, but they're just wandering. It's going to be impossible to just stroll the blocks." "We could mow through them and stick to the shops," Alex suggested. "Right until the rovers in the shop grab you and drag you in, or worse, ambush you with weapons. Without any cover, we're stuck here until they either clear out the rest or the team comes to back us up," Dallin answered. The two carried on with Alex listing suggestions and Dell shooting them down. Layla instead crawled on her hands and knees towards the wreckage, feeling how sturdy the pipes were. "What about the second story? Or the rooftops?" she asked, interrupting their quiet arguing. Alex crawled over and started pushing on the pipes. They held their form and weren't too wobbly. "What do you think, Doc?" he asked. Dallin was preoccupied with shedding his vest and taking the little pill bottles he had carried in it, stuffing them in his fatigue pants. Layla gave Alex a surprised look, but to Alex it seemed like addicts as allies were becoming commonplace. The doctor opened one of his bottles as Alex's shadow fell over him. "Of all the people I've worked with, I'd have thought you'd know better." Alex thought the doctor was ignoring him as he dropped 3 pills into his hand and quickly swallowed them in a gulp. Dallin lifted the bottle towards Alex, exposing the name. FE821T7. The doctor held a hand to his mouth to stifle a cough, but made a twisting motion in the other hand. "Iron-based potassium iodine, trial 7. This isn't a drug that gets you high, is it?" The doctor let out a quiet laugh, the first Alex had seen since he met the man. "That's the price I paid for coming home a little too soon," Dallin replied, his voice groggy. Alex could tell the doctor was fighting off a coughing attack and not doing too well. They needed to move soon. "Layla, help me get him up. Whatever is wrong with him is making him sweat." She rushed over and poured her canteen of water into the doctor's mouth, then helped to lift him by his shoulders. Layla moved away once Alex had him and began her ascent to the second floor. Alex lifted the doctor up where Layla could reach him. The old doc didn't cause him any strain as he heaved him up, which made Alex more concerned about his illness. Dallin was considerably lean for a man of his age. Layla pulled him up without much effort and dragged him into a room that had yet to collapse, and then laid him on an old mattress. Alex made his ascent quickly and stopped just short of the doorway. Layla poured more of her water into the doctor's mouth, then set the canteen in his hand as she made for the doorway. "Why would Jack send us all this way for a dying man?" Alex asked as he put a hand to his head. "He's not dying. At least I don't think he is. I saw this before in the waste with my old crew." Layla moved past him and back into the room with the collapsed floor. "It's radiation sickness. Scavs get it all the time, going places they shouldn't." "Don't say that. We're getting out of this," Alex said, moving to her side. "We always do, don't we?" Layla didn't say anything at first. She just turned her head away from him. "If I hadn't said anything, the refugees would be safe. The doctor could recover, and we'd be on our way out of this hell." Alex moved in front of her and took her by the arms, trying to get her attention back. "We're lucky your house is a block or two from hell, then." Layla let a small smile slip, but then thought again of Dallin. "If Dell can't move, one of us is going to have to stay with him." Layla rested her hands atop Alex's arms now, if only to be on equal footing. "Come on," Alex said. "Let's go check and see if he can still move." "How is the giant clock still standing?" Tyler asked from the rear as the trio sprinted down a collapsed hallway. "All built from the same essence of their pride, Irishman," Jack replied. "Oh yeah, what's that mean?" Tyler asked as they continued their jog. Jack slung his rifle across his back and grabbed his flask and shot back a pull. It means they were vain enough to keep their largest monument standing, Jack answered, offering his flask to Tyler. Tyler shot a glance over to Elias and then shook his head at Jack. The old man took another pull for himself and continued. Like us, like the rest of the world, they all knew it would come to this. He extended his arms out and around the devastation that surrounded them. The only effort they made to preserve their history was one fucking monument. The old man looked to his left. Stained glass littered the floor, and sunlight reflected off it in such a way that it illuminated the grand room in various blues, reds, greens, and oranges. For a few moments, the three men stood there and watched the beauty surrounding them as the clouds cleared. The room was a mosaic of color and light. Even in place so fatal, under the darkest ashes of the world, the light and the beauty that comes with it illuminates forsaken graves, Elias said under his breath. He picked up his jog, whether the other two were following him or not. Eli would have rather gone with Alex on his trip back to Victoria Street, but he knew this is where he was needed. Alex wanted someone to always have eyes on Jack in case the old man tried to pull anything. Tyler seemed to be a different story. Eli could see the change. He was honest where once he'd cloud his answers in nonsense or with jokes. Honest with where his life had taken him, with the loss of his brother, and honest with an addiction he was struggling to break. Tyler's loyalty wasn't in question. It was his conviction. Elias knew Alex didn't need soldiers who would take a bullet for him. You could find those anywhere on the streets of New Purgatory. Alex needed men and women who cared about their own lives, who had something to fight for. Elias's thinking stopped about the same time he ran into impassable debris. Now what, old man? Elias turned, and Jack was already making for one of the side doors. Dell had another secret road. That's how he got that transmitter up there in the first place, the old man replied. Why not tell us about the tunnel? How the hell do you know all this shit? Elias asked loudly as Jack popped open a cellar door. Because I helped him do it. Jack stood up straight and looked at Elias. The younger man's head was cocked to the side. It was a deal we made before going after Morrison, and all Dell wanted. I still remember helping him trap these tunnels when we were done with them. I doubt he's used them since. He probably has another way up the tower. Old Dell told me these were for moving members of Parliament covertly. Elias moved towards the cellar door and entered with Tyler close behind. Was there much dissent here before the war? Tyler asked. No more than anywhere else, I suppose. They had the disadvantage of being allied with the States when the UN split. The trio moved down a wide set of stairs and switched on the light on their weapons to fight the darkness. The Germans always seem more interested in recovering supplies and tech from France or Italy. They've been content to leave this island to rot, Jack continued. Yeah, hate runs deep, Tyler offered. They left the refugees to die, Elias said, spitting off the side. World doesn't miss dead conquerors, kid. They got all new ones they got to deal with, Jack replied as they reached the bottom of the stairs. Yet here we are, doing a favor for one to get him to come with us. Jack laughed at Elias's response. Shit, kid. Dell's not a conqueror. Neither are we. Hit the ground, Tyler yelled out, spraying bullets in front of them before jumping behind a wall next to Jack. Rounds flew past the group. It was return fire. Rovers? Jack called out as he turned the corner and laid down fire into the darkness. Elias had moved behind cover and waited for the flash of their enemy's weapons fire to expose them. Elias? Jack called out to him again, but the response was more gunfire. Elias took advantage of the brief illumination and put a bullet in the heads of the far targets. Clear, Eli yelled as he moved from cover. Jack and Tyler came walking by the opposite side wall. It did not take long for Elias to identify the Marines by their black armor. Fuck, how did they get down here? Tyler asked. Water was beginning to run down their tunnel area. It's a big tunnel system, Jack replied. But right now we gotta go. That water means someone is trying to unlock the commons hatch. He motioned for the two other men to follow him as he broke out in a run. As the trio ran, Elias noticed the water level rising ever so slowly, his face being sprayed by the heavy droplets that rained from the ceiling. That hatch controls the ocean's flow into the tunnels, Jack huffed as they approached a fork of 4 different routes. Water was inching up to their knees. This one, Jack said, hurrying down it. Tyler and Elias exchanged a glance of bewilderment before racing after the old man. The trail of bodies ended near a street Janet could only identify as CRE by the burnt and scratched out road signs. Rover corpses had gotten fewer and far between. She hoped they were on the right track. Otto covered her from the rear, though neither of them had yet to fire a shot since leaving the hospital. Otto had a sick feeling in his gut, like the first day he'd been locked up in prison. If Tommy had run off with the bird, all this would be for nothing. Wandering through the red river that was swathed across the middle of hell wasn't the smartest idea, but after years of forcibly sitting on his hands, there was nothing Otto wouldn't do. He kept his eyes to the sky while Janet watched the ground, hoping he'd be able to spot either their hell chopper or the enemies. There were no bodies as they passed a succession of stores. Glass littered the streets, remnants of the blown-out windows from every shop. The road, the stores, the husks of old cars were either gray from ash or charred from fire. The only color was blood washing down the road. "Check the comm," Otto whispered. Janet brought her hand to her ear. "Alex?" She waited a few moments. "Come on, Alex, tell me you're alive." There was a hum of static that broke the silence. "I hear you, Janet. I'm in the pale red store with Dellen, second story." Otto and Janet spotted it almost as soon as they heard it over their comms and hurried in. Alex helped pull them up to the second story. When Janet got up, she spotted Dellen on the ground, though she couldn't tell if it was because he was dead or sleeping. "Where's Blondie?" she asked as she pulled her canteen from its pouch and took a sip. Alex had the look of a defeated man on his face. "We decided it'd be too dangerous to try and bring him with us. She went ahead alone." He stood up and reached for Janet's canteen, but when he went to drink from it, it was empty. "See the chopper on the way in?" Alex asked, tossing the empty 10 back to her. "Just all the corn it husked," Otto replied, kneeling by the doctor's side. "Shit, Del, and here I thought you were the one who got off clean." The doctor coughed before responding. "Didn't see you earlier, Otto. Don't worry about it. You did what you thought was right," Otto's gravelly voice replied. "Looks like everyone had a price to pay." "Ugh. If I'd stayed, Eric," Dellen started before Otto cut him off, "might have rot in prison just as I had, and you'd have joined us." "How long?" Dellen tried to stifle another cough and failed. "How long were you?" 10 years, Doc. All 10 years, Otto answered. Janet moved to the doctor's other side. "Dale, you said my dad's name before the hospital blew up. I've heard Jack's version, but I want to know why my father got left behind." Dallin didn't answer. Even in his sickness, Janet could see his reluctance. He seemed to eye Alex, who was putting together his gear. "Going somewhere?" Janet asked. "I need to catch up to Layla. I know she can make it on her own, but..." Alex stopped short. "Yeah?" Janet said. "She wanted me there with her. We argued about it, so I'm going. The doctor's yours." Alex loaded a clip into his rifle and began to climb down to the first floor. "The long-range comms went down, so we'll meet you back here," he finished, looking up at Janet. "Think Tommy stuck around?" she asked sarcastically. "If he didn't," Alex turned his back, "then he just went a notch higher than Morrison." Janet watched Alex through the partially shattered glass. When he sprinted beyond her vision, she focused again on Dellen. "Why did you leave him behind?" she asked, gripping the doctor by the seams of his vest. Otto turned his head and gave her a hard look, but she ignored it. Dellen's guilt kept him from opening his mouth, but he had no way of escaping. Otto looked down at the man he had called a friend and a comrade for many years. Even now, as older men, they still couldn't seem to escape trouble, or their past. "We're all paying our sins due, Del. Best get yours out of the way," Otto said as he stood up and made for the other room. "I'll stand watch." Janet gave him a nod and let Dellen go. The old man laid his head back down on the mattress. "The pills don't actually fight the pain," the doctor blurted out. "They make it worse until the fever breaks." Janet could see him clutching a bottle tightly in his right hand. "Jack told you about our mission, yeah?" Dellen asked. "Just how it ended." Dellen turned his body away from her. "Not our best day. Jack told me you were with him, from the time he was hit to when he died. What went wrong?" "It was us. We couldn't stop to let him catch his breath, and there wasn't enough time for a field surgery. Jack told me I could carry him or leave him to die. So I carried him damn near 20 flights of stairs until it was clear we had failed. By that time, your father was already gone, and we made the jump to the chopper." Janet didn't betray any emotion, but simply took a deep breath and reached for the dog tags around her neck. Jack hadn't lied to her. Dellen's story rang the same truth. "I will always regret your father's death, Janet," Dellen called out, flipping his body back over. Janet shook her head. "You got the opportunity to make up for it now. But what happened to his body?" "Jack had helped me set up a lot of what I had out here before that mission. It was his payoff for helping him try to take down Morrison. I had some old radio equipment. Tried to contact him about what happened to your father's body." Dellen was sweating less and forcing himself up. "Jack set up a memorial, or so he told me. Then he said I should have just let it go. I never bothered picking up the radio again after that." Janet was clinking together the tags in her hand as Dellen spoke. "How did you get those?" the doctor asked. "They're his. He left them in a locker in Mass. Same with the rifle. Still surprises me. Like he knew I'd go looking for anything about him." "Not me. That sounds a lot like your father. He talked about you all the time. He wanted to make sure you had a chance in this life. That's why he came with us," Dellen said. "He gave me that chance. He died making sure you and Jack could live. I'm going to make sure it wasn't a waste and finish what he started. We must end this nightmare, Uncle Dell." Dellen let out a snicker, bookended by his cough. "Primum non nocere," Dellen said. "First, do no harm. Janet, do you really believe Morrison's death will buy us all peace?" the doctor asked. "No, but it's the only choice we have left." It was eerie how familiar it looked, even though the windows were shattered, the paint covered with ash, and it being shrouded in darkness from the overcast weather. "Home," Layla said to herself, taking in every angle of the building's architecture. Its worn and dilapidated walls and the overgrown vegetation that grew over the flooring and up the walls. Layla saw a natural beauty about it, but it was morbid like moss over a gravestone. Reality kicked back in when she saw two rovers exit the home across the road from her. She threw her back against a wall and waited for them to move on. When they did, Layla moved deeper into the building, whose name she had forgotten, until she found a rusted sign that lay by the entrance. Dakar. Beyond the sign were the stairs that led to her childhood home, inside the large apartment building. Her heart was pounding. Her most important goal was about to be met. It wouldn't bring anyone back, but she hoped just being there would bring her some peace. As she began up the stairs, a putrid stench began to fill her nostrils. She pulled part of her flight jacket up to cover her mouth and kept climbing step after step. Layla assumed that the rovers were storing bodies for food, and not very well. Once at the top of the steps, she cut right. Like a regular homecoming. She approached the door she knew was hers, but hesitated as she reached for the handle. What if I don't like what I find? What if it's all been destroyed? Is this going to hurt? Why do I have to do this alone? Alex had forced her to go on alone, and Layla knew he had been right. This was something she had to do by herself. Layla reached for the handle on the door and twisted it. The handle clanked short. Locked. With all the force she could muster, mixed with a bit of anger, Layla threw a kick into the door and brought it down easily. She reached for her gun and took a few quick steps inside, expecting more rovers. There were none. The room was in pristine shape, apart from the few papers and books that lay scattered on the ground. The living room was easy to remember. She wiped her hands across the old suede couch where she spent so much of her time reading, studying, and preparing for school. Her parents often reminded her that all her hard work would pay off one day. It had. Layla thought it was a shame they were right, at least in this way. That demanding work let her keep her life. She plopped down on the couch and dust flew up in the air. The cushions were hard from lack of use and water that had no doubt seeped into the room. Had it really been 19 years? Everything felt the same as it did all that time ago, but hurt her knowing the truth. No matter how much it felt the same, everything had changed. Layla pulled herself off the couch and moved towards her parents' bedroom. Its darkness and emptiness triggered tears she had thought she was long past. She could stop herself from screaming, from whining, but the tears fell from her eyes and down her reddening cheeks. The overcast weather was beginning to bring rain down, and the wind helped it find her body. Perfect. Layla walked into the room and sat down on her parents' bed. The covers were musty and damp, but she didn't care. She couldn't hold her sadness inside anymore. She kicked and screamed and threw her face into the pillows, howling until it hurt her throat, and then howled some more. I just wanted to see you one more time, she cried to herself. Just one more. I miss you both so much. When she finally pulled herself up, she looked across the room at an old mirror that had yet to be shattered in this broken world. Below it lay her parents' armoire. The same hesitation came rushing back to her. She was again afraid of what she might find if she looked through it. Layla could remember her parents being called intelligent by their friends and coworkers, but she tried her hardest not to suspect anything. Layla pulled open the top drawer, revealing a lone key, the one to her family's safe. Layla felt her heart stop. No, she said to herself. Dad always kept his socks here, she mumbled. Layla fought down the lump growing in her throat and the ice hardening in her stomach. Her family safe was hidden in her room. Layla recalled her mother saying it would be the place a criminal would least expect to look. Layla wondered that after all the killing she had done, if she was now a criminal too. Ezra replayed the feed of Otto firing hundreds of rounds into one of his hell choppers, sending it pitching off into another. Ezra had engaged the auto turrets when part of the Crusader group had surfaced, though he had not anticipated the local populace getting in his way. He felt he was above the manual control of a machine so advanced, but even it was flawed in its targeting. Better to let it leave me an open hunting ground. The chopper did a quick return for fuel before heading back towards the Victoria Street kill zone. When no life signs appeared on his radar, Ezra grew curious until his musings were rudely interrupted. Ezra? A voice yelled through the comm. Where are my other teams and their choppers? The scruffy Israeli man flipped the switch on the comm. Later, he would have to remove all the bugs and tracking devices that General Atonali had no doubt installed in the chopper. For now, it was not an issue. He punched up the landing commands on a nearby street. The ground should be clear enough. The computer brought up the name Dacker, and Ezra accepted the landing location. There was an instant jolt of inertia in his stomach as the chopper began its downward momentum. He reached for his black helmet and put it on, ensured his scatter pistol was loaded, and opened the ramp door. The wind was blowing hard atop of the roofs, but it wasn't because of the weather. A hell chopper came down just a few houses away from Alex's position. He bounded from nearby roof to nearby roof, hurrying to get to it before the bird hit the ground. When he reached the final house, the chopper touched down, and its ramp was coming down. A man, not unlike the other Marines he and his team had dispatched earlier, came down it alone. The well-built man stood up straight, as if he had no fear of the rovers that owned this Deadzone. Scraggly hair poked through the bottom of the black helmet. Then the Marine gave a glance upward, directly at Alex. Ezra raised his scatter pistol and fired off a blast at the figure staring down at him, but it moved with the darkness. The bounty hunter lowered his pistol, having lost sight of the specter. He moved off the ramp and away as it closed and locked itself back into place. He raised his wrist to use the advanced tactical system built into his armor. Ezra set it to search for heat signatures and to broadcast them to his helmet, a perfect tool in this climate. The tracker revealed a presence on the second floor of the building just ahead of him, and another close by. Alex swung his rifle hard at the side of the Marine's head, and then tackled him to the ground. As he expected, this man was no average foot soldier. The man rolled with the tackle and kicked Alex off him, before quickly coming back up to his feet. Who sent you? Alex yelled, putting his fists in front of his face. The Marine stretched his neck from left to right before lifting his own fists and threw a feint towards Alex's head before delivering a hard kick to the stomach that doubled him over. The Marine went to drop an elbow on the back of Alex's head, but Alex drove his shoulder into the armored soldier's chest that forced him back. Alex came back up and circled with the soldier. I could have shot you on the way down, Merc, Alex said. The little tool doesn't help much, does it? Alex threw 2 more quick fists that the Marine backed away from. Then the Marine threw 2 of his own that Alex batted away with his wrists. The Marine kept his mouth shut and threw another kick, this time at Alex's side, then a hard right to his chest, knocking the young man to the ground. The Marine ran for his gun, but Alex would not be kept down. He reached for the pistol Jack had given him and fired on the man's scatter pistol, knocking it just out of the mercenary's reach. Hands up, slowly. These positions were always the worst kind, but Ezra managed to smile under his helmet. He didn't need a pistol to escape from this amateur, who, impressive as he was in hand-to-hand combat, was no match for himself on equal footing. Ezra spoke into his comm as he slowly brought his hands above his head. Computer, activate AT Protocol 1, authorization Ezra. Ezra turned towards the smaller man whose gun was aimed for his face. I don't mind shooting you now and rooting through your files later, asshole. You have an out if you tell me who sent you. No, I don't, Ezra replied through his helmet. The bounty hunter ran and dove behind the chopper, just as the auto turrets began their assault towards the other man. Alex mirrored Ezra's roll and hid behind a torn-apart car. Ezra punched up the ramp button from his wrist and hurried back into the bird, not sparing a glance to see if his assailant was dead. He ran towards the cockpit and slammed his fist down on the autopilot, taking the chopper straight up and away from London forever. Alex found himself covered in dirt after the automated cannons were far away enough to stop firing. The spinning of the gun was the only alert he had. He silently cursed the creativity of the mercenary. He moved over to where the merc had left his gun. It was a strange make, nothing he'd seen back home. It was larger than a pistol, but kept the same shape. He tossed it to the ground. Alex knew now that the man had to have been hired by Morrison. Only mercenaries and bounty hunters had gear like that. With no more threats in his immediate area, he went for his rifle and slung it across his back, but kept his own pistol in his hand. He assumed the large building the merc had been staring at was where Layla was hiding. It was gigantic. His first thought was of her education. It made sense that a smart girl had parents who were well off. Well off. He made a mental note to not say that around Layla, for he was sure that she didn't feel well off. As he approached, he could make out the silhouette of someone standing by the shattered window. What the hell was that? Layla called out over the comm. The mercenary leader. Doesn't matter now. Are you all right? Alex asked. Relatively. If I asked you to come up, I'll be right there. Layla waited by the collapsed door for Alex. Even though it had been long deserted, the beauty of the living room and its size had Alex awed. All this was yours? He asked as he meandered through the living area, staring at the bookcases and antiques that were in pieces. My parents owned part of this building. They lived here with the other residents. I never had a house. Not one I can remember, anyway, Alex replied. He pulled a book off the shelf, but it nearly fell apart by its cover. Where's your room? He asked. Layla pointed a finger across her body to the closed door on the far side of the living area. It was an office before I was born. Mom told me that Dad loved the view. When I was born, it became mine. But now... Layla stared down at her hands where a key rested. Take as much time as you need, Alex said as he placed his hands on her shoulders. What's that to? Only one way to find out. Layla moved past him and over to the entrance of her entire childhood. I'll be right here then. Layla turned around. No, she said, and moved back towards him and reached for his hand. I want you to see it too. Alex gave her a nod and let her lead them inside. He could feel her hands trembling through his gloves. It was almost certain they were freezing cold. The door squealed open loudly and just about fell off the hinges with a light push. Layla's eyes lit up when everything came into focus. My bed, she said to herself, running a hand along the dirty comforter. It was much too small for her now, but she lay down on it anyway, and looked at her room as if she had just woken up from a long dream. "I spent too much time here, but everything is like I remember, just as I left it." Alex took a seat next to her and removed his gloves, taking one of her hands in his. "Tell me about it," he said. Layla smiled faintly back at him and walked them over to her desk. "This seems like the only thing that matters now," she said while fiddling with the drawers. "When I was old enough to sit by myself, my mom and dad put me to reading anything they got a hold of. There were broken pencils, dried pens, and burn-up notepads and journals. Everything else is important, but this..." She sat in the old kid-sized chair. "This desk and everything that happened on it saved my life." Tears were rolling down her cheeks again. "I was always told that an education was the difference between a good life and a meaningless death." "They were trying to save you," Alex responded. "All they wanted was for you to be safe." "But they pushed me into this desk. It squandered away all the time we could have had together." "Layla, they did what good parents are supposed to do. They were looking out for your best interests. They had no idea there would be a war." "Then why the key?" she asked. Alex had no answer for that. He found it as odd as she did. They had left something behind for her, like they knew she would find her way home one day. "You're one of the few people left in the world that can call this place home. You survived what others didn't." Alex wiped the tears away from her face as he spoke. "If they hadn't forced you to do all that work, to miss all that time you could have spent with them, you'd have never ended up in America. We'd have never met." She couldn't look at him anymore, instead vying for the dirty floor, her boots, anything but him. Alex kneeled in front of her, stealing her gaze. "And I love you more than anything on this earth." He took her hands as she slightly lifted her head. "I love you more," she replied, fighting hard to hold back any more tears. "You brought me all the way here, and I'm yelling at you." Alex shook his head. "There's lots of memories in this room. It's okay." He could feel the cold press of the key on his hands. He took it and looked at it before placing it back in Layla's hands and closing them around it. "Take all the time you need. I'm right here." The water level had risen to Jack, Elias, and Tyler's chests, with no exit in sight. "Never thought I'd end up like a rat," Tyler yelled. "Why haven't we run into any more soldiers?" Elias asked. The old man ignored them both. He'd yet to say anything since choosing their route. "Hey, you old fuck, I'm in charge, remember? Where are you?" "You should leave the fucks to Drusilla, Elias. You're not as convincing as she is," Jack finally replied and sloshed hurriedly through the tepid waters. Elias suppressed the urge to fire his pistol at Jack, to, if anything, awaken the man from his drunken stupor. Then the old man stopped without notice. "Here," Jack yelled. "Since you don't like leading from behind, maybe you'd like to make the ascension first?" The old man stood off to the side and held an arm out towards a ladder. Elias glared at him before grabbing hold of a rung and heading up. He tried to take satisfaction in the fact that the chilly water would drip down on the other two's head. Elias gave a look upwards to see an exit, but saw none. "Oh, when you gotta go, you gotta go." Elias began relieving himself and climbing faster. "Place smells of fucking piss," Tyler called out from the low end of the rungs. "Sewers are like that, I hear," Jack replied. "Keep climbing." The darkness of the sewer didn't bother Elias much. Before meeting Alex, he had used some of the remaining subway tunnels to hide back in New Purgatory. Many back home thought only the worst of the refugees stayed in the old tunnels where tepid water flowed and rumors of cannibalism were exaggerated. Eli had a way to detach himself from the emotions that others considered taboo or disgusting. He could boil them down to grains of thought. Fear had no place in his existence. Fear was his heart rate increasing, his hands trembling, his breath leaving him. He understood someone had to initiate that fear. Darkness could not kill him. Only men and their tools of war could. But he was also a man, and a man with his own lethal tools at his disposal. It was this, he thought, that put him on the same level as fear. It fell then to his confidence. If he held no fear against a man who did, he could easily topple him. That way of thinking was not perfect, however. Remy's sacrifice continued to weigh heavily on his mind. even though Janet seemed to be filling that void. He wondered how long she too would last. He didn't figure her to be a woman who stayed in one place for exceedingly long. Elias stopped when he hit his head on top of the darkness. "Fuck," he yelled out. "Push up," Jack yelled back. Elias rubbed his head before doing as the old man commanded. A circle popped up, and bright light nearly blinded him. When he looked up, he saw it was because mobile lights on generators were directed at the hole. With no one in the immediate area, he climbed out of the hole and proceeded to check all directions. He was in a square room that had been dilapidated by time. Some of the walling was strewn about the area, and chunks of concrete were missing from the flooring. When he walked past the lights, he could see the dust that was once the floor illuminate in the air he was breathing. It wasn't until he looked up that he realized where he was. "Nice to see no one's gone and stolen the bills yet," Jack said sarcastically as he climbed through the hole. "This place supposed to smell like piss too?" Tyler asked as he pulled off his coat and vainly attempted to wring it dry. "Are these Dylan's lights?" Elias asked. Jack reached for his rifle before moving towards another set of rungs that led up the clock tower. "No, let's move." Tyler followed Jack and Elias up, but after a few minutes he could feel the uneasiness set in his stomach like rotten food. He was not a man who enjoyed being high up in the air. He kept his mouth reluctantly closed as the group made their way up the rungs. Every time Tyler looked down, he had to swallow back his fear. To his relief, Elias and Jack hurried up the rungs, and he followed right along. There was no doubt in his mind they were curious if there was another trap. Tyler just expected it. He was too drunk to care about being shot down. At least that death would be quick. His real worries were how sweaty his palms were with the grasp of each rung, and how he hoped the booze wouldn't make him miss one on accident. Only a musty, unmarked grave waited below. "I'm not gonna die in fucking England," he said to himself as he grasped the next run tightly. "What's that, Ty?" Elias called out. "Nothing. Hurry up, would ya?" "There's always another contingency," Ezra thought as a trio of life signs appeared on his tracker. He had already plotted his course home, but the explosives he had planted at the base of the clock tower were still active even at range. He contemplated changing course to go and watch what destruction his handiwork would create, and to see if Otto were in the building as it went up. Of course, the life signs could have been more of Autonelli's men, but that mattered little to Ezra now. The general would not take kindly to the loss of his troops and stealing one of his hell choppers. Ezra hoped the plan he was formulating in his head would satisfy the man, if only for a brief time. The detonator was set to trigger on a button off to his right. He reached out and hovered his hand over the button. The thought of being the destroyer of a centuries-old monument appealed to his ego. "You're not going anywhere, you fuck." The voice that blasted over Ezra's comm was followed up with chain gun fire that tore into the hole. Interior sirens blared, and the chopper's screens were showing damage to one of his turbine engines. Ezra pulled his helmet off and went for the comm. "Fire again, and the clock tower goes down." The shelling stopped. He watched as the enemy chopper moved to his front side. It hovered at equal height, its chain gun still slowly rolling from the assault. "Got some friends that wouldn't like that," a man replied over the comm. "And I wouldn't like burning up over the English Channel. Tell me your name," Ezra asked. "Tommy. Yours?" "You seem an agreeable man, Tommy." Ezra laid his accent on thick. "I'm not here to negotiate. Stop wasting my fucking fuel and tell me what you want," Tommy shot back. "My freedom. From this place buys an hour of time for that tower. If you chase me down, or continue hostilities, I will blow the tower right fucking now." Ezra's words dripped venom, and Tommy did not respond. Ezra's scanner showed the enemy hellchopper racing back for London at full speed. He breathed in a sigh of relief before staring back at the button, pondering if he shouldn't just hit it there and then. Turbulence rocked the cockpit, and he pulled the stick back, hard. First, he needed to regain control of his own bird. The safe was hidden behind Layla's desk. Alex watched as she pushed it over, sending old memories she no longer wanted crashing to the floor. He stood beside her with his arms crossed and watched as she inserted the key and pulled the handle. Layla sat and viewed the contents. He couldn't see what she was looking at, but he was still more focused on the tears welling up behind her eyes. Still, she reached inside the safe and pulled out a large binder. The label was as pristine as the day her parents had put it there. Layla, 2-5. Layla opened the cover to reveal several plastic pages that protected various photos from her childhood. She wasn't sure whether to cry or smile. She couldn't remember her parents keeping a photo book, let alone owning a camera. Seeing her parents' faces for the first time in years was refreshing to her memory. Finally, she smiled and showed Alex a photo of her father and mother. Layla continued to thumb through the album until she reached the last page. These were the photos of her at the airport with her parents, with the other children who were selected, and finally at the terminal before boarding. Before seeing the pictures, that day had been a distant memory. Now it all began to flood back. Layla flipped the last page on her old life, hoping to leave it behind forever, but it revealed a paper note, folded in half. Her heart felt like it might beat out of her chest. She snatched it and opened it, flattening the paper over the binder. She looked down at the heading addressed to her and started reading aloud just like she had on so many projects and books to her parents all those years ago. Dear little flower, it was always our hope to be able to raise you to use your mind when the time was right. If any of that paid off, you're still alive and reading this. When you were born, we both knew bringing a child into a world so hostile towards itself could only end in disaster. But we were selfish. We loved you before you were even born, and wanted to spend as many years with you as we could. We hope you are old enough and wise enough to understand why we pushed you so hard. We wanted you in the program because of what it was built in New York. To move there would have been more expensive than we could have managed. The oil prices that reached their highest peaks prevented plane tickets to follow you. But you were smart enough to save yourself. And we were so proud of you when you made it that far, but not as proud as we would be now, knowing that you've made it back home. You may never have an easy life, one that has been emptied of privileges we had. If doubt ever descends, look back at how far you have come, the challenges you faced, and the ones you've beaten. With all the love in our hearts, Mom and Dad. 24/12/17. Layla clenched her jaw shut after reading off the date. The letter was dated a week after she had left for the month-long trip. Tears ran down her face, and she brought her hands up to wipe them away. They wouldn't want to see her like this. She had to live up to her strength. Layla refolded the letter and put it with her album, then stood beside Alex. I never knew, but I don't care. They were right. She latched her arms around him. And so are you. Alex smiled. Do you want to stay around a little longer? He asked. She shook her head and then reached for the gift she would treasure for the rest of her life. No. I've taken away enough of our time with this. I just want to move forward. With you. There were more lights glaring at them when the trio reached the top of Big Ben. Elias shot them out with his pistol while waiting for Jack and Tyler. Once they reached the top, Jack made way for the old radio. He gave it a swift kick and it hummed on Adellan's old transmission. I don't understand something, Jack. Why didn't you tell us about setting this place up with Dellan? Elias asked while the old man changed the codecs to the radio. There's more to it than that. I might have helped him get a start here before our mission, but I came back after too. I shadowed him. Made sure he had everything he needed. I made it so the conveniences he ran into would ensure a healthy stay in this place. I don't get it. Why lie about that? Elias asked. Some things are better left unsaid, kid. Dell doesn't need to know he had an invisible hand guiding him out here. I just needed him alive. Not to understand why I did what I did. Jack never looked up from the console, but Elias could see the tension in his brow. I'm getting sick of you leading us into more and more darkness, Elias said, and he stuck a finger in the old man's chest. Soldiers aren't afraid of the dark. Jack snarled as he pushed away Elias's hands. He went back to typing when the sound of a hell chopper cut out the new silence. Jackie boy, are you and your crew in there? It's time to fly. Tommy's voice rang out over the comm. What are you talking about, Tommy? Jack answered. Not enough time. Tower's gonna blow. You need to get the hell out, the pilot yelled back. Jack glanced over at Elias. Grab the radio, the old man ordered. Without hesitation, Jack lifted his pistol and fired a shot through the glass around the clock's arms. Tommy, drop the rope ladder. We'll jump for it, Jack said. Are you fucking kidding me? I'm better off climbing, Tyler protested. You'll be dead in 5 minutes, Tommy cut in. It's on a strict detonator. The clock tower team watched as the rope fell from the chopper's hold. Tommy did his best to maneuver close to the building to give them a better chance. Hope you two aren't afraid of heights, Jack said calmly before sprinting towards the hole he made and jumping towards the ladder. He caught a good rung in the middle of the roping, wrapped his arms around it for good measure, and then made his way up. Elias tossed his jacket to the side and held the radio tight in his left arm. He outstretched his right. If this doesn't get you to quit drinking, I don't know what will, Eli taunted. The old man did just fine, Tyler replied. The old man isn't afraid of heights. Elias made his sprint and jumped across, his right arm barely grasping the bottom rung as he nearly dropped the radio. He wrapped his arms around the bottom and let Jack pull him up. When the old man dropped the rope again, Tyler knew it was his turn. 2 minutes, McGrath, Tommy said through the comm. Tyler shed his own jacket and looked across the small stretch he had to run. One misstep, one bad bound, and he'd end up a bloody stain in a bland country. No, I'm not going to die in England. Tyler broke out in a hard sprint towards the opening. As his feet pushed off the edge of the tower, he could feel the weakness in the jump. He extended his arms out as far as they could stretch. When his fingers tightly gripped at threads of rope, he knew he had made it. For just a moment, as he went to pull himself up from the bottom rung, he spared a glance down below. A large pile of refuse, glass and metal shards waited. Tyler quickly found new strength in his arms and pulled himself up the rope. Fuck. At least Dellen can still have his signal, Elias said as he helped pull Tyler into the main hold. Jack's reply was stifled by turbulence, the sound of an explosion. The pair quickly grabbed onto the chopper's metal frame, though their legs were almost swept up from under them. It was all over in a moment, though the air seeping in the exposed hold that was dustier than before. You guys catch that? What a fucking sight, huh? Tommy said over the comm. He seemed jubilant, even though his companions had narrowly escaped death. Oh, we saw it all right, Elias said as he pulled his pistol from its holster. Where are the others? Jack asked. The big man airdropped himself by the hospital after taking down 2 birds. Solo. He didn't even give me a chance to rev the guns. Think he was chasing after your ice princess, Elias. Jack palmed his face and looked over at the younger man, who was ready to storm the cockpit. Okay, now you can kill him, Jack said from the corner of his mouth. What? Tommy screamed over the comm. Find their signatures and get them to us, Tommy. Someone will deal with you later, I'm sure of it, Jack spat. Alex and Otto helped carry Dellen down from the shops, while Janet and Layla guided down the hell chopper. Dellen made Alex stop when it touched down. I'll go on my own power, the old man said firmly. Doc, you look like you haven't eaten in about a year and that sickness isn't making you any stronger, Alex replied. The doctor tried to forcibly push Alex away, but there was no strength behind his exertion. I feel like I'm a child again. I can't even fight you off, the doctor said weakly. Yeah, save your energy for chewing and turning over in bed. We're not carrying any replacement hips, Alex chuckled. Dellen kept his mouth shut while Otto helped him the rest of the way up into the chopper. Jack came drunkenly down the ramp towards Alex, Elias in tow. There's a problem, Elias said immediately. Alex threw a hard elbow to the side of the old man's head. Jack went crashing to the ground without a grunt or whimper. A big problem. Why did you lie? What the hell else are you lying about? Alex said as he stared down on Jack, who was trying to pick himself up. You stand up again, and I'll put you back down. Do you really think I'd have everything I do without connections? Jack cried out. How many times are we going to go through this? You trust me enough to arm me, my friends, and then you go a step further and offer soldiers at the cost of wading through your lives in the world's hells. Your plan is reckless, the way a drunk fights. All that matters is Morrison's death. I will throw fighter after fighter at him, sacrifice as many lives as needed to accomplish that, Jack yelled. As long as that man lives, nothing else matters. The rest of the team had gathered to see the conversation. You're a sadistic son of a bitch. What made you that way? Alex asked. You weren't there. I can't let him get ahead of me again to get the best of me. Secrets are a currency of war. They buy better lives and betrayals. They end wars before the first battle is even fought. If that man even gets the slightest twist that he has a ranger in his fold, then we're all dead. Everything I've composed on him in the last 10 years goes out the window, and he has a textbook on every one of you and my other associates. So it's about security? Elias asked. Partly. Jack lifted an arm, waiting to be hefted up. Elias obliged, but Alex kept his hardened stare. We're fighting a war, kid. Sometimes you fight from the shadows because you don't know who has their ear to the wall. I didn't want to share the bit about coming here because it could have made Dellen even more hostile. What did it matter? I know the roads, the hideaways, and that we were probably going to be attacked. But we survived. Jack glared back at Alex as he wiped blood off the side of his head. But now you got me talking, so why not share a little more? That sniper on my list, Dweegu, he was on my old team, and he was only a kid. Little Brandon fucked up when we needed him the most. And you want to pick this guy up? Alex scoffed. Absolutely. He's had 10 years to make up for his mistakes. 10 years in frozen waste where men should fear to tread. 10 years to become better than the man he thinks is dead. And why does he think that you're dead? Elias interjected. Because I wanted him to. Jack stumbled his way back up the ramp.